Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. Today, a Seiko extravaganza, right? Well, I'm sure a lot of you are probably saying, well, isn't it always a Seiko extravaganza? Yeah, well, it is my favorite brand, and I probably might discuss that and the reasons why it is my favorite watch brand in another video. But today, what have we got? Well, first of all, I'm going to have a look at my darling little Panther Cub SKX mod. This is the final mod. I'm as close to perfection, so we'll look at that. Also, Andrew at 555 Gear has very generously lent in the Alpinist, and I'll be comparing it to the green one, so shout out to him. We'll discuss that in just a moment. A wristwatch check, of course. There we go, the Flighty. It could only be the Flighty, which I recently re-reviewed. 5 years with the Flighty, can you believe it? Still absolutely in love. I discussed its history, its evolution, how my perceptions have changed, and why I love it so much quite recently, so have a look at that video. I've also noticed in the viewfinder that there's another Seiko. There's 5 Seikos, because we've got my world timer clock just slightly to the corner of the frame there. 20 bucks, I think it was, 30, 20 bucks, something like that, back in the early days of, that was donkeys ago, it really was. But anyway, what else? We got a couple of other Seiko goodies, which we'll share in just a moment. But let's start off with the Seiko SKX. So what did I have done? Well, first and foremost, I upgraded from the NE36 to the NE15, which essentially is the 6R15. I've said a few times before, it is my favorite kind of mid-range caliber from Seiko. It's essentially a souped up derivative of the 7S26. Its lineage is in a history of calibers that is just renowned for being rock solid over time. And I wanted it in an SKX, so it was fantastic to have it done. And that upgrade extends to all things. I mean, even the date is that little bit quicker. If you know the SKX like I do, it used to drive me mad that it takes several hours just to, cycle through both the day and the date complication. So what else have we done? Well, I was going to have the tip of the seconds hand in red, but then I thought, you know what, let's change it to orange to match the Divers 200 of that iconic SKX dial. And you'll see that I've changed back to the Mercedes hands. There is no real reason. In fact, the Mercedes hands technically are less legible in low light than the standard stock hands I had from the SKX013, because they have less luminescent Lumibright in them, and they are blacked out. But this was purely a matter of taste. I just love Mercedes hands. It is a trope of Rolex, undoubtedly, but the dial I didn't have changed whatsoever. I just love the little air tank markers at the 6 and 9, and of course the triangle, that big with the cut-off edges. I adore that. I adore this layout. I wouldn't change it for the world. What else has changed? Well, I actually downgraded the bezel. This is a ceramic insert with the numerals engraved. While it's less legible, I think it gives the whole watch more of an understated look. That is something that kind of put me off before. I would have loved to have these section loomed up. Unfortunately, they don't have a loomed version of this particular one, or yet, to my knowledge. That's probably the only thing I would change from this, but this, I just like the kind of stealth look of this. The crystal is exactly the same. It's that double domed with the anti-reflective coating that you can see there. This is the sapphire upgrade. The case was exactly the same. This is the Cerakoting I went for originally. This is a material that they use for the finishing on firearms. It's an American technology, and I've added the signed crown. There is a loomed version, but unfortunately it would have delayed the whole thing by several weeks. But it's a nice touch. The loomed crown is not essential for me. I like to have the S there. So this really has been more of a refinement than a complete overhaul. And then probably one of my favorite features, that this was Jeff's idea, and this is why I love Jeff, because he really understands how to get the most out of a watch, and this is why I keep going back to him. So you'll see, last time he had the case back done in this sandblasted finish, gives it a wonderful kind of tool-tastic look, but this time he did the big wave of Kanagawa, the instantly recognizable Hokusei inspired motif. He did it in a high polish. It's just a wonderful, subtle little touch. It accentuates the Hokusei wave beautifully. It finishes it, really completes it. I love that. This was entirely his idea. So hats off to him. And interestingly, it still has the designation of the old movement. But anyway, yeah, very cool. I did have the choice of having a see-through case back, but personally, I just love the wave. So it's really good to see it brought to its utmost glory there. Pretty much the biggest change was internal with the new movement. I adore the 013. I started with the 007, then I went to the 013, and then with this final version, it's just perfection. I adore it. As soon as I got it back, it has been on the wrist a hell of a lot, I've got to say, and the finishing Cerakoting is holding up extremely well. Something I do appreciate about Jeff's work is his attention to detail. It's immaculately done. He even pressure tested to 200 meters after he did all the modding, and he regulated it. So even though this particular movement out of the factory is about -15 +25, that's the factory specs, but after a few weeks of wear and with some careful regulation, this is well within COSC. So built like a tank, it looks cool as flamingos, and the kippers knickers. So before we take it back to the studio, let's just pop it on the wrist so you can see. 6¼ inch. Interestingly, it weighs the same as the Alpinist, around 80 grams. Legibility with the Mercedes hands is hindered a little bit. We do get a slight variation in the luminescence compared to the dial, obviously, because the dial is far more generously applied. But the anti-reflective coating, sometimes it looks like it's not even there and you just want to touch the hands, and other times you see that glorious blue hue that gives it, it's just lovable. It's the perfect watch, and for my scale it is perfection, and that's why the SKX is so wonderful, that there's an SKX for everybody, and I've really made this one mine. I love the fact I'm never going to see anything like this unless somebody makes one identical, but it's tailor-made for me, and that bespoke quality is priceless. And talking of the price, let's take it back to the studio, because I think some of you might be shocked at how much a mod of this quality and caliber costs. Anyway, so let's take it back to the studio. It's around just shy of $1,000, and I know a lot of you are going to roll your eyes. Oh, I could have got a Marine Master, this, that, the other for $1,000. Well, there's something you get with this that you don't get with other watches. You don't get that personalization. There's also another reason why I didn't do a price breakdown. With talking it over with Jeff, it's becoming very difficult to price these things directly, because essentially every mod is different. Sourcing some of the parts can be more expensive than first thought. There's shipping, there's also the man hours, depending on the complexity of the modding. Some parts are just simply cost more than others. So what he's done now, he just has set prices and he goes with the movement, and then he takes it from there. I still absolutely 100% recommend Jeff. He is the master. Capo lavoro. I'll leave his details. Check out his Instagram, amazing photography. However, I do warn you, there's a long queue to get his services, and rightly so. I mean, he is the maestro when it comes to watch modding. This is my last SKX. I know, I've said that before. Right, let's move on to a few gifts. First of all, I was sent this lovely t-shirt. Look at this, with the Hokusei wave. And this is from the brand Uniqlo. Uniqlo? I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Stunning. I'm gonna enjoy sporting this in the summer. Whoever sent it, they didn't leave a card. I don't know who to thank, but whoever it is, thank you so much. Extremely generous of you. And talking of the great wave of Kanagawa, I received this. This was a gift from my wife for my birthday back in February. and they recently had an exhibition at the Met, and inside is a pure silk scarf. Look at this. This is very luxurious with the print. So if you guys have seen my video I did, sartorial video, it's going to work wonderfully with the crushed velvet dinner jacket for the opera, the blue. I mean, look at that. Absolutely gorgeous. Look at that. Ah, that is fantastic. So shout out to wifey there. What else? I have a few leaflets here. Sorry, I've probably mucked up my microphone. I apologize. This was sent in by Cameron. Shout out to Cameron. Thank you for this. He just visited the Seiko Museum, and he got these leaflets discussing the full Seiko history there, as well as a brochure of the museum. This is on my bucket list, and he said in his letter here that he hopes that I do a museum tour like I did the museum tour of JLC. And in fact, actually, there's still some museum tours I shot in Switzerland I haven't even edited yet. I went to the Tag Heuer Museum, which was amazing. I just never got around to editing. I will one day. The Seiko Museum, forget the channel, it's on my own personal bucket list, so that will happen, definitely. Just a question of when. Tokyo has been on the cards for a while. I will make it happen, I promise, guys, so stay tuned. What else? I think that's about it for the gifts, but yeah, cool, huh? Right, let's move on now to the Alpinist. And this was sent in by my good friend Andrew at 555 Gear. He did a really great video, really focusing and discussing the controversy around this release. I think it ties in quite nicely with a video I did last year on deceptions and misconceptions of the watch industry. I think the release and how it was handled, or mishandled if you will, is very emblematic of what's going on really, especially when it comes to journalism in the watch industry. Maybe we'll save that for another video, but anyway, guys, do check out his video. I'll leave a link. I think he did a terrific job at discussing well, everything revolving around the release. I'm not going to go into that. I think I'd like to just focus on the watch itself. This is quite a special watch for the channel. For a lot of you guys, you are massive fans of the green one, and rightly so. So without further ado, let's change perspectives. We'll do a review of this, and then we'll come back and talk about the negatives and positives. Finally in blue, and look at it, it's just ravishing to look at. For sake of comparison and context, we have the previous incarnation, the SARB017 there. A bit of a Marmite color, but definitely a lovable watch with a bit of a cult following. And I've put this one on the green melange, well, not green, it's a really dark olive drab with hints of little black. This is the from Wrist Candy Watch. Guys, you know I've been banging on about these straps. These are the best Perlon straps out at the moment, in my opinion, and finally surpassed the German dominance of Ulit with the quality. But anyway, and I can't remember where this is from. I don't think it's Wrist Candy Watch Club, but this is just the standard navy for old Bluey here, the Blue Alpi. Now, before we get into it, we really should just give a little bit of history to the Alpinist line. They're the third oldest Seiko sub-brand. They were originally introduced in 1961 with the intention of being a reliable timepiece for Japanese mountain climbers and other sports enthusiasts alike. The production of this watch was important because it was the first real attempt at making a sports watch by Seiko, so hugely significant in terms of the brand's history. They were inspired by the Yama-otoko, which is Japanese for mountain men. Mountains cover much of the Japanese landscape, as well as being heavily featured in their art, such as the classic and iconic ukiyo-e wood prints, which we've discussed several times before. So these mountain men required something rugged, yet with the necessary complications for navigation, that could handle the rough terrain and obviously be dependable for accuracy. The Laurel Alpinist was the first of 7 generations, followed by the second generation, which was known as the Champion 850 series, named partly because of the caliber 850, the manual wind movement inside. Then there would be a 30-year span before the Alpinist was updated again. In 1995, that introduced the automatic and hand winding 4S15 caliber. There was a big shift here in the aesthetics and a move towards the numerals, which we'll discuss in just a moment. This generation famously included the red Alpinist, which followed by a GMT titanium prospect quartz variants in 2003. These are exceptionally rare indeed. That had the 8F56 movement. And then in 2006 generation of Alpinist arrived, which is pretty recognizable in the versions we have today. They incorporated many of the features from the previous generations, but they were upgraded with the 6R15 movement. So we had cream dial variants, black dial, and the immensely popular green dial. Interestingly, it was the green dial that became the most popular. It's pretty a unique color and very much put the Alpinist line back in the limelight. It was something of a underrated line of watches, despite its significance. But that mixture of sportiness and elegance has always been a very distinctive characteristic of the Alpinist. And throughout all the generations, they were always revered for their exceptional quality and craftsmanship. So first of all, let's just get the basic specifications out of the way first. We'll start with dimensions, and nothing has changed here. 39.5 millimeters in diameter, a height of just shy of 12 millimeters there. Lug to lug is 46, and a 20 millimeter lug width, which is certainly a crowd pleaser. The size hasn't changed whatsoever. Also, the case is exactly the same. We have that mixture of brushed on the top and then the high polished entirely stainless steel screw down crown, the 200 meters water resistant, that second crown at the 4 o'clock that operates the internal rotating bezel. That is the compass. We have that flat sapphire crystal, virtually the same layout on the dial, but of course in a different color. So now in 2019 we finally have a blue Alpinist. Well, technically it's not the first blue Alpinist. There was a kind of teal blue version back in the day. I believe it had a GMT. Funnily enough, I did actually predict this color change, not this precise hue of blue, back in 2018. I did a live show, and I'll put a mock-up that I did just interesting to see. I think it was a logical progression, and that picture certainly got a lot of positive response, and it's good that the Seiko are paying attention to the good Gentry, which of course we are famously known as quite diehard Seiko fans, for good reason. So we've got the same layout with the applied numerals at 12, 2, 4, 6, 8 and 10, then little arrow heads in between those. The date, everything is exactly the same, but if we just pull in the previous incarnation, there you can see they've shifted away from gilt to silver or stainless steel. The hands are also the same. We have those very particular cathedral semi-skeletonized hands, and the only change of print is the frame of the date, which is now in white to match the rest of the dial. Thinking about it more, I think it actually reminds me of some of the earlier Rolex Oyster Perpetuals. Whether Seiko purposely was referencing them, who knows? It also has an uncanny resemblance to the Smith's 1953 Everest, which was famously the secondary watch to accompany Sir Edmund Hillary on that historic journey. Whether that was inspiration back in 1995 for this change in layout by Seiko, who knows? Then again, this was a style of dial very popular in the 60s. I'm glad they stayed with the inverse Explorer dial layout. I think the same way that the 3, 6 and 9 Explorer layout has become synonymous with the Rolex, this being Seiko's answer to the Explorer, it gives it its own identity and character. So I think it's integral that they kept on with this layout. The color blue they've chosen is really quite vivid. It changes from, I would say, an Aegean blue to a Prussian midnight blue at times. It has a very similar kind of grainy texture that the previous Alpinist also had, which is funny because usually with sunburst effect it's a little bit more glossy. The only variation in color, again, we have those little hints of red on the inner rotating compass bezel there. Text Again, we have the same script with the italicized automatic and with very diminutive but still quite responsive Lumi-Bright Seiko loom. That is something that I do appreciate about the hands. They not only look pretty, but the very particular shapes are easy to distinguish. The only issue that I think with the loom on these later Alpinists is that the orientation isn't that great. Would have been nice to see maybe a double marker at the 12 just to give it a better indication of which way up it really is. If we have a look at the back, we see a slight change here with the limited edition, but essentially it's the same iconic triple mountain motif. This started with the second generation in the 60s Champion 850, so it's nice that they've carried on that tradition. It's just a standard screw down case back. Polishing is absolutely outstanding, razor sharp edges, beautiful little chamfered sides there, wonderfully smooth. The high polish is remarkably mirrored in finish, and tiny bit of knurling on the actual crown that is signed. That's the main crown at 3 o'clock, and then a concave detail just to differentiate at the secondary crown at the 4 o'clock. So once again, inside we have the 6R15, no change here. This is quite possibly my favorite Seiko movement. It was introduced in 2006. It's a higher spec derivative of the 7S26, however, upgraded dramatically. So we have things like hacking, hand winding. We have quick set for the date. It's a 23 jewel movement. It operates at the slower 21,600 vibrations an hour. However, it does boost the longevity of the life of the movement, because obviously less friction on the moving parts. So you have the Spron 510 mainspring, which allows it to have a really generous 50-hour power reserve. We have the DearShock protection, and of course the automatic bidirectional winding, thanks to that wonderful magic lever system. This is of course entirely in-house made and features many of Seiko's own proprietary innovations and technology. For the sake of this video, I'm actually going to show you shots from my wife's SARB013, which houses the SR15C. Interestingly, the watch came on this leather strap. Now, something I've criticized the SARB line extensively in the past is the low quality of the straps. Seiko are kind of infamous, notorious for cutting corners here, but I have to say, this amazing strap, it is made in China. It's got a lovely texture, it's very supple, it feels like quality. Okay, it's not quite collar reb territory, but a substantial improvement, so you've got to give props to Seiko, and I think the black actually works with it really, really well. This is obviously a response to the current trend of vintage inspired straps like this, and it has a lovely subtle grained texture to it. It's quite thick and substantial as well. So the big question is, how does this stunning little beauty wear? Well, let's try it on. I've forgotten how tall it is. It's quite taller than I remember. But it has a wonderful scale. I mean, the size is absolute perfection. That is something that I'm glad they didn't change, because it's a certified crowd pleaser. The weight is exactly the same because we don't have any change in essentially the materials. It's 80 grams. But what is different is the luster. It doesn't pop as much as its green predecessor. It's a little bit more subdued, but it still has a lovely little bit of pizzazz with that blue and the way it plays with the light. The only criticism I would say here is the lack of anti-reflective coating is to its detriment, as you can see there, but still very legible at a distance. It's striking without being brash. It's alluring without being flashy. It's certainly, it's gorgeous. There's no doubt about it. Now, my wrist is 6¼ inches, and if we compare it to the green Alpinist, there's no difference in comfort. For me, this is the ideal size. I think the proportions are absolutely spot on. I wouldn't change a thing about it. And as you can see on this particular melange strap, I think it looks gorgeous. The blue undoubtedly is going to be more compatible with different colors of straps, but essentially these work well on rubber, NATO, Perlon, and of course, leather of all different styles. But as always, it's not entirely perfect, so let's discuss the positives and negatives. Unequivocally, the quality is there. I love the history. It's very much one of the most underrated iconic watches and hugely important to Seiko. For its price range, and I'm not talking about the scalping, jacked up prices, the real retail price, I still think it's great value. You've got the in-house movement in there, you've got the superb finishing and quality to it. It's a well-crafted watch. The main strength of this watch is, to some extent, I think even more so than the emerald green one, its predecessor, because the blue is definitely going to be more of a crowd pleaser. But I'm talking really about the utility in not only what it was designed to do, but from the mountain range to the boardroom, from smart to mountaineering attire, it just works. It really is a strap monster. But not only a strap monster, a situation monster. It's very difficult to do that, guys, to do a watch that's the do-it-all watch. Very much like the Rolex equivalent, the Explorer. Incidentally, my favorite watch. It's quite interesting. This is my favorite brand, but my favorite watch is by another brand, Anyway, so you got the performance, you got the robustness, it's all there. 200 meters water resistance. I mean, yeah, it's very difficult to beat. The all-rounder. I like that they've kept a lot of the refinements, like the applied numerals and the hands. They haven't disrupted or done anything to its detriment. However, despite its practicality, there are some negatives. First of all, I think this is a bit of a missed opportunity. They didn't refine it. They didn't make it any different. So at the same time they're playing it safe, they just changed the color of the dial and the inner rotating bezel. That's it. There's no new upgrades or new features, and I think that's a bit disappointing. I would have loved to see a ratcheted inner rotating bezel there. I think that would have been a nice touch, especially as sometimes once on the wrist you can actually knock it with a cuff and it's quite easy to rotate unintentionally. One of the refinements I mentioned, I would have loved to see the crystal flat or flush with the bezel because dirt and grime does kind of collect there. The little nuances, that's what I'm talking about, that's the kind of nuances I'm expecting. It's one of those sizes that just suits so many wrists, especially as sizes are getting smaller. I'm glad they stuck with that. However, I wish they would have made it a tiny bit thinner. I don't remember it being as chunky as it is. Maybe that's just me because in recent years I'm getting very accustomed to more manually wound watches. Actually, there we go, that's an idea. Imagine this, thinner with a manual wind movement with the display back and decorated to the nines. That would be amazing. Seiko, if you're listening, yeah, let's try and make the next generation like that. Paying homage to the original, the Champion series. I think that would have been really, really cool. There's something about the emerald green of this, combined with the gilt dial. Okay, the gilt detail, maybe not for everybody. This is a bit of a Marmite watch, undeniably. But the same thing that makes this different is the same thing that has that special allure. Less ubiquitous, the combination of gold with green. It has a regal quality. You don't see too often. I mean, how many green watches are there? I mean, there's the Hulk, obviously, and there's some Oris Aquises, but off the top of my head, there's not that many. So yeah, it's a very difficult thing to balance because at the end of the day, this is certainly going to be more appealing to a wider audience. I mean, blue watches, it's one of, and the blue is done incredibly well. It's a lovely shade of blue. It's very understated and it's a classy blue. And talking of class, it is pure class. We cannot deny that. Am I going to buy one? Probably not. Since the release of this, it has been a few years. I mean, it's been donkeys since I reviewed the green one. Since then, I've fallen in love with the Explorer. That's my do-it-all favorite watch. I think it would be a little over the top if I bought this. I've got to scale down. I need this like I need a hole in the head. However, I can recommend it. Well, providing the prices have settled and they're not as extortionate as some of them are right now. Anyway guys, I'm gonna leave it there before I rabbit on too much. I'm going to be actually returning the blue one, the blue Alpi here, along with my Explorer. Andrew's going to borrow my Explorer. He's considering it. I think it's between, if I recall correctly, he said it's between that and a sub, a Rolex sub. So I'm very inquisitive to see how that plays out. So enjoy it, Andrew. Guys, do share your opinions. What do you think about the Alpinist? What changes would you like to have seen in this generation? Is it a missed opportunity, or did they just nail it? Did they not need to do anything, you know? Right, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very, very much for watching. Please don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and found it useful. And as always, guys, I will catch you in the next one. Okay, ciao.
This is a public service reminder for the good Gentry. Please follow us on Instagram, join the Facebook UGWC group, and click on the bell to keep notified of new videos. Don't forget to keep it positive, keep it Gentry, onwards and upwards. Thank you.